What's up, hockey fans? My name is James Blennau, and welcome back down to ice level. Today's episode is going to be a Hockey East Conference spotlight, but before we get into our interview with our guest, Anthony Travalgia, let's go over the standings in this super competitive conference. At the time of recording this, the Beanpot final has not happened, but Boston College leads with 38 points. Maine follows them with 36. BU in third with 32, UConn with 28, and UMass Lowell with 26 round out the top five. Merrimack sits closely behind them with 25 points, Providence with 24, and UMass with 21. And rounding us out in the bottom three are Vermont with 19, Northeastern with 17, and New Hampshire with 13 points in the conference. And for one last warm-up, we're going to go over the stats leaders from across the conference in a few different categories. So let's see who's leading the pack. In points, Ryan Leonard of Boston College leads with 26, followed by UConn's Hudson Shandor with 24, and BC's Gabe Perreault with 21. In goals, Ryan Leonard leads the pack with 19, and UConn's Joey Muldowney and BU's Quinn Hudson and Cole Iserman all are tied at second with 12. In assists, Hudson Shandor leads the pack with 17. Gabe Perreault follows him with 16, and Cole Hudson with 14. In face-off percentage, minus the few 100% outliers at the top of the list, JP Turner leads with 87.5 from New Hampshire, and Jack Musa from UMass and Connor Eddy from UMass Lowell are tied with 71.4, just below the leader. Our top sponges from across the conference start with Braden Engum from BU with 43 blocked shots, and Joseph Mysak from Merrimack, Gavin McCarthy from BU, and Tom Messineo from UConn, all tied with 34. For our goalies, Albin Boya from Maine leads the pack in goals allowed average with 1.52, followed by BC's Jacob Fowler with 1.73, and Callum Tung from UConn with 2.2. In save percentage, it's more the same. Albin Boya and Jacob Fowler tied in first place with a 9.38 save percentage, and Callum Tung just behind them with a 9.31. I'm here with Anthony Travaglia from College Hockey News for our Hockey East Spotlight. Anthony, it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me, James. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. What are your general thoughts on the Hockey East right now? We know it's a very competitive and star-powered conference, but what do you,
Yep.
as someone that follows it very closely, think of it right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's the deepest conference in college hockey right now. And, you kind of look to 2, 3 seasons ago, and the conference kind of got away from that. They didn't have those powerhouse teams that, we had seen in years past. And, they weren't sending as many teams to the tournament. And that turned last year, obviously, with BC and BU and Maine, and that's certainly carried over to this year. And it's as deep as I remember it, since following college hockey. And you look at the top 16 of the pairwise, and 8 teams from Hockey East are there, and 6 in the top 12. And I say the top 12 because that kind of feels like the safe zone to get into the tournament. You look at the pairwise as a whole, and Atlantic Hockey is going to bump somebody from that top 16. The CCHA will bump somebody from that top 16. You look at a team like Quinnipiac, right? They sit 12th, and for whatever reason, all the success that they've had, they've struggled in the ECAC tournament. So, does somebody else win the ECAC, and now they send 2 teams and that bumps somebody? So that 12 top 12 is what I kind of call the safe zone. And right now, you got 6 teams, 6 hockey's teams there in that top 12.
Yeah, that safe zone super important, and a lot of players have been helping those teams stay in there. The star power in this conference is almost unmatched compared to any other. But what would you say, who would you say your top players in the conference are right now by position?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Ryan Leonard. I mean, what can you say about him? We all know why he came back. He has unfinished business. Guy should be playing in the NHL right now. With the way last year ended, that brings him back. And he's just dominating, and I give him a lot of respect. I think he took a lot of heat last year for some of his actions. I think that kind of gave some people a sour taste, and for him to come back and put the NHL off, by a year and do what he's doing, I think that kind of turned the way people look at him. It certainly did for me, and I just think that maturity level there has been evident. Um, Back end, I mean, Cole Hudson. We just talked about, Ryan Leonard, right? He was the MVP of the World Juniors. Personally, I thought it should have been Cole Hudson. I thought he was the best player for Team USA there. But he's just been outstanding. Really caught my eye the other night at the Beanpot in that semifinal win over Harvard. He takes a penalty right off the bat in the first period. Harvard scores. Obviously, BU goes on to blow out Harvard there, but after the game, he held himself accountable and called himself out for what he called the bad penalty. And head coach Jay Pandolfo kind of walked that back, and he felt he didn't think it was a bad penalty. He didn't think it was a penalty at all. So for a young kid like that, he had a 3-point performance that night, but it was that penalty and them scoring on it that stuck out to him. So I thought that was very mature of him as well. Another defenseman too I've been really impressed with is Vinny Borghese. Over at College Hockey News, we introduced our chip rating this year, just a way to rank players. He's the leader in Hockey East defenseman there. He's got 20 points offensively. He leads the team by about in ice time by about 4 minutes in average per game. So playing some big minutes there for Northeastern. And goalie. I mean, obviously, no one's surprised by what Jacob Fowler has done, but I have to go with Albin Boya. I mean, just outstanding for Maine. Such an important piece to what they've been able to do. We talked about those teams in the top half of the pairwise, and he's certainly a big reason why Maine is there. Not only one of the top goalies in Hockey East, but all of college hockey so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of those names replacing big stars from last year. Hudson replacing his brother Lane, and Boya replacing Victor Ostman. You talked about, what was it, the chip ranking that you guys just introduced?
Yeah. So it's it can be found on our website under our Hobie tracker. So it's kind of used to measure the Hobie banking Baker rankings. I don't know exactly the science, the mathematical formula that goes into it. I just know that it takes into account a lot of different data to spit out those rankings. So some cool information to see there, as well as time on ice too. We added that to the website this year, so kind of nice to be able to see who's logging those heavy minutes.
Yeah, definitely a great resource for all you fans to check out. Let's jump back into teams, though. There's some teams here, like your Boston Colleges and your Maines, that are really meeting their expectations and being as good as they are. But there's a few teams around the conference that are kind of exceeding their expectations from the preseason. Who would you say they are?
Yeah. I mean, two teams come to mind. UConn. I mean, a lot of people had them picked in the bottom three. I mean, preseason coaches poll had them at 8, and uh, understandably so. They really took a beating in the transfer portal, right? And, Matthew Wood, Salmon, and Arseny Sergeyev. I mean, some big names there. But hey, when one door shuts, another one opens, and guys like your Hudson Shandors, Ryan Tattle, they've really stepped up and carried them up to 6th in the pairwise. I mean, I think they were as high as 4th after winning the Connecticut Ice Tournament there a couple weekends ago, and they had some real quality wins too. BC, Maine, Providence. So certainly surprised with what they've done. Looks like they're as close to a lock of the NCAA tournament you can get to without being one. So good for that program to take a step forward with all the big names they lost in the offseason. And then Lowell's the other team, similar to UConn in the sense, picked in the bottom 3 of the coaches poll, and they've played very well. 10th right now in the pairwise. So it looks like they'll be one of those bubble teams that we just talked about. Huge boost by the return of Ben Meehan coming back for his grad year. You don't see too often anymore. Those guys returning to the same school for their grad year. So he's been outstanding for them and been a big part to their early success.
Yeah, and UConn, I got a chance to watch them at the Connecticut Ice actually a couple weekends ago. Just seeing them find ways to win is really impressive what Mike Cavanaugh's done with the program.
It certainly is, yeah. And I mean, I think, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I think everyone saw, Matthew Wood transfer out and thought that was kind of going to be the nail in the coffin for them. And they've rallied around that and gotten guys to step up. And, they certainly, I mean, that was a really good 1-0 win over Sacred Heart in the final there. And, like I said, they've had some good wins against some of the better teams in Hockey East. So, they're going to be a tough out in the Hockey East tournament, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely some really tough teams in the tournament, but there's also some teams that are not exactly delivering on their expectations, some teams that are underwhelming in a really tough conference. Who would you say those teams are?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's a tough conference, so hard to say anyone's really underachieved with how deep and good the conference is. But if I had to pick one team, I'd say Northeastern. 24th in the pairwise. It's going to need to win Hockey East to make the NCAA tournament. Maybe they still have BU. I think UConn Providence left on the schedule. So, you know, maybe making it to the Hockey East final, not necessarily winning, considering who they would have to beat to get there. Maybe that's enough to get in. Um, you know, kind of expected a closer game in the Bean Pot the other night. And just they BC had their way with them. So a little disappointed, I guess you can say, they've been the underachiever of the conference.
Yeah, it absolutely is a tough conference. And with their schedule, especially the teams that they play, playing in the Bean Pot too, it doesn't help. I wonder, honestly, if it was more about how good of a team BC is that score line was a thing, more so than how much Northeastern struggled.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny too, is when you look at BC and they're not scoring the goals at the volume they were scoring last year, and they're still dominating teams, but you look at some of those dominating efforts and it's a 4-0 game, it's a 3-1 game. They really haven't had those explosive offensive games like we saw the other night.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on, my favorite part of this, actually. I love doing this. Jacob Cherish dropped some really good takes the last time I was on here, and we were talking about his takes from the preseason when we last spoke.
Mhm.
But what are your hottest takes for the season going on in the Hockey East?
So I think I'm gonna get a little crazy here. I'm gonna say
We love crazy.
BU is gonna miss the NCAA tournament.
Really?
Kind of crazy, right? Coming off their beatdown of Harvard. I mean, you look at where they are in the pairwise, but I look ahead to their schedule, and they got 3 games with Providence. They still got BC, obviously coming up Monday, the Beanpot final. They got UConn, tough games there, but then they get Merrimack, Vermont, Northeastern on their schedule, and they slip up in a couple of those games, and things don't go well for them against those, the 3 bigger teams we just talked about, and that can really dip them down in the pairwise, especially where you have those teams behind them in the pairwise that can certainly pass them. It's the Providences and some of their teams behind them that they would be losing against, regular season wise, and getting into the Hockey East tournament there. They're the ones that would be surpassing them. So, yeah, kind of crazy coming off that win. I mean, they've scored 14 goals in their last 2 games now. So kind of crazy to see a team that sits pretty well in the pairwise and just scored 14 goals in 2 games isn't going to make the NCAA tournament. But let's get crazy.
Yeah, it's not as crazy though when you think about how young and inexperienced of a team that they have. They had a goalie that debuted in a rivalry game on
Yeah.
the road. I mean, that's no easy task.
Yeah, I mean, and credit to Yegorov. I mean, he's been good. He certainly looks a little funny still in his Omaha Lancers orange pad with the, white and red BU sweater. But I mean, he's looked great in the 3 games that he's played in. So, certainly that issue is trending in the right direction. But I don't know. I just something crazy has to give in the conference, and that's the road I'll take.
All right, and to wrap us up, what are your final standings predictions going into the tournament in just over a month, actually?
Yeah, it's coming up quick. in terms of overall standings wise, I mean, I think it's going to be tough to rank them top to bottom. What I will say is it's going to be a bloodbath, and I think what's going to be so important and make these games just so important is, you go back to last year's hockey's playoffs and that UMass Providence game, right? And UMass beats Providence. They get into the NCAA tournament, and Providence is one of the first teams out. So I think you're going to see a lot of situations like that where you're going to have two teams where it's, win and you're most likely in the tournament, and lose, you fall out. And I just think that's going to make just for such great, even more entertaining hockey. Ultimately, I mean, I don't see anybody knocking BC off. I just think, even with the losses that they had after, last year, the talent they lost, I mean, they're still just as loaded as they were, last year. Certainly a more motivated bunch. So yeah, I have BC winning it. Who they go up against, I mean, UConn, Providence, Lowell, Maine. None of them would surprise me if they got there, and it also wouldn't surprise me too if we saw I know we just talked about them underachieving, but Northeastern gets there, Lowell it wouldn't surprise me. Whatever happens wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, I'm gonna go BC winning it.
Yeah, it's hard to not be surprised. I always say on the podcast, this is my favorite conference to follow week in and week out. There are so many great teams and so many great games. I think it was Providence just hung 6 goals on UConn last weekend at the time we're recording this, as 7 and 9 in the USCHO poll. Like, what the hell is going on?
Right. It is. Yeah. It's just, it doesn't make sense night to night, and that's what's been so good about the parity of the conferences. I mean Merrimack beat BC earlier in the year, so it's, when you get into the playoffs and you get into those one and done situations, I mean, anything can happen, right? It's one bounce of the puck and everything could go against you. So that's what makes hockey so great, and that's what makes these playoffs so great.
Yeah, definitely really excited to see these Hockey East playoffs. Anthony, thanks so much for coming on. We're going to move on to the Hockey East Special Edition Forecheck Forecast.
My pleasure, James. Thanks again for having me.
The Ice Level Podcast is sponsored by Best Damn Tape. Best Damn Tape's mission is to supply the most affordable and elite level sports tape to athletes worldwide. You can go to bestdamntape.com and use code DanKShow40, that's DanKShow40, to get 40% off your order. Go to bestdamntape.com and order your clear tape, your black and white tape, scented stick wax, and more.
Before we wrap it up, let's take a look at the Forecheck Forecast for games throughout the Hockey East, and let's see what's going on this weekend. New Hampshire visits Maine in a 2-game series at Alphon. Vermont visits Merrimack for more of the same in a 2-game home split for the Warriors. UMass Lowell visits Northeastern on Friday night, and Northeastern comes home to face the Riverhawks on Saturday. BU visits Providence on Friday night, while Providence comes to Boston on Saturday. And UMass comes to BC on Friday night, with the Eagles going to visit the Minutemen on Saturday. And that's all for this conference spotlight. Thank you all so much for coming down to Ice Level with me. Thank you again to Anthony Travalgia for joining me for this episode. As always, I'm not an expert, and neither are you, but let's grow college hockey together. I'll see you guys next week.